this hand-picked group of 24 people that believe what I believe, that have similar values, and we disagree on everything, and we're constantly frustrating and hurting each other's feelings and like making each other mad. But usually, and again, we're not perfect, but usually we talk about it, and then we become better, I think, human beings, frankly, because we learn more about ourselves. We learn more about how we show up to other people. We learn how to effectively share things that are upsetting us in a way that is hopefully both candid and kind and elegant. And to me, those are the master skills of being a human. So if we get good at that, yes, first of all, you're going to make a lot more money. And cool, that's great. Let's all make money. I want to swim around in a vat of $100 bills like Scrooge McDuck. But
you're listening to The Pivotal Leader, where modern leaders talk about the moments that shifted their organizational cultures and pivoted their teams to success. Hey everybody, this is Gina Trimarco, Chief Results Officer of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. Each week on The Pivotal Leader, I feature inspirational leaders who know how to positively impact their customers, employees, and brand through culture building. In this episode of The Pivotal Leader, I interviewed Mark Fisher, an in-demand international speaker, consultant, and entrepreneur. His core expertise is helping business owners achieve financial success and personal freedom through community building, leadership development, and creating healthy organizational cultures. Mark and his non-sexual life partner, Michael, created Business for Unicorns in 2016 and have since worked with clients like Sony Music, Sylvan Learning, and the ACLU, as well as many of the leading fitness studios across the U.S. and U.K. They are also proud alumni speakers of TEDx Broadway. In addition to their consulting and teaching through Business for Unicorns, Michael and Mark also co-founded Mark Fisher Fitness, one of the most successful gyms in the history of the fitness industry. MFF has 2 physical locations in Manhattan and was recognized as number 312 on the 2015 Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in America, as well as one of Men's Health top 20 gyms in America. With a reputation as the fitness home of choice for the Broadway community, Mark and MFF have been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, the New York Post, the Huffington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, among others. MFF has made waves in the fitness industry for its unprecedented growth, industry-leading results, and unique approach to culture. Living their mantra of ridiculous humans, serious fitness, MFF provides progressive training and nutrition protocols in a delivery system of subversive humor, fantastical imagery, and outrageous antics. And you really do need to go look at their websites, because if you're as irreverent as me sometimes, I think you'll really enjoy it. They also inexplicably talk about unicorns. They call their clients ninjas and treat fun, community, and personal growth as core values. During the past several years, MFF has raised over $200,000 for various charities, including Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and co-producing a concert fundraiser with the Broadway company of Wicked, benefiting those affected by Hurricane Sandy. Mark is also a proud co-founder of the Uprising NYC, an innovative nonprofit devoted to empowering people to embrace their inner superhero. So let's dive in and learn from Mark. Hey, Mark, welcome to The Pivotal Leader today.
thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
We met at an EO meeting and I felt an instant connection to you because of your performance background. And we started talking about performing, and I'm always looking for interesting people to put on the podcast, and knew a little bit about you and knowing about Mark Fisher Fitness. And so I was like, oh, this would be a really interesting entrepreneur to put on the show. And then I dove into your website and I felt like I went on this like Wizard of Oz journey.
Yeah. It's like you accidentally took acid. That's correct.
Yes, that's exactly what it felt like. And so on this podcast, you could continue to be as you are, because I think you're very interesting. And we'll also tell people about where to go see your website and all the different things going on with you. I didn't even know where to begin. Usually I have a list of questions, and I thought, well, I'm just going to jump right in. because I think your background is really interesting on how you started out from an actor standpoint and what you have built so far. So if it's okay with you, can we just kind of start with how you got to where you are right now? Because you have so much going on, I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
So maybe just a little brief background.
Yeah, I'll give you the super fast version. I guess the context that is important to know for my life at this point is I, as you mentioned, has a background in the theater. I grew up performing in shows and I was a theater nerd. And I also was, like many theater people, very insecure about my body. I didn't really identify as an athlete. And like many humans, as I got through high school, that insecurity about my body became something I thought more and more about. It was something that I knew, because of my ambitions to be an actor, would be something that it would benefit me to address. And in spite of my trepidation, I finally got up the courage to join a gym my senior year of high school. And to this day, it's interesting, and I always think back on that month of my life because it was uniquely horrifying. And it's interesting in that I always remember very distinctly the smell of my mother's cigarettes in my hand-me-down gold Cougar that I would drive to the Stafford Pool and Fitness. And I would sweat and I would listen to late 90s alt rock and try to psych myself up and go into this cavernous space, the Stafford Pool and Fitness, which, coming from a lower middle class area, was full of really wonderful, large men wearing flannels and jeans and work boots. And it was more so than any place yet in my life. And this was saying something, was a place for me to exquisitely not belong. And in spite of that, I really desperately hoped that one day I'd be able to kiss girls or be successful as an actor. So I kept going. And the thing that was interesting is over the next 5 years, I went through this transformation where I put on a little bit of weight. I can't say it was a super dramatic physique transformation, but I found myself falling in love with the gym. I fell in love with fitness because, particularly throughout college and once I arrived to New York and I was broke and I was looking for work and I really couldn't control anything about my life, the gym became something like a church. It became the one thing that I could count on. Mm-hmm. And throughout my 20s, I was a very, very serious student of both fitness, something of an amateur philosopher. And by the time I neared the end of my 20s, I found myself no longer wanting to leave town to work as an actor. And although I feel fortunate that I worked pretty consistently, I made it even a bad living many years, I was just in a time in my life where I was ready to settle down. And I often describe fitness as the mistress that I left my wife for, which was the theater. And essentially what happened was, in the summer of 2010, I decided that I was going to read at least two books a week indefinitely. I had read some mentor figure of mine, was also a voracious reader. And in short order, my life really exploded. And I was a pretty voracious reader beforehand, but I think that level of rigor where I decided I would read one book on training and one book on business, which hilariously was ostensibly because I could learn more about business from my acting career, in short order left me very inspired by entrepreneurship. I was very inspired by conscious capitalism. I was inspired by the opportunity to create mission-driven communities. And within a 9-month period, I told my agents I was no longer auditioning. My best friend from my high school community theater group quit his job and moved to New York City. We convinced a couple other friends to light their lives on fire and quit their jobs. We emptied out my savings. We moved a bunch of furniture into a studio that we leased. And that's why we always say we accidentally started a gym, because it was a very quick turnabout. So that kind of brings us here today. And I guess the quick context I'll give for anyone not familiar with Mark Fisher Fitness is that I wanted to create a place where I could work with other eccentric people, because that was my community. My community was theater people. It was show folk. And I knew that I could combine my passion for very rigorous, best practices, evidence-based training, really steeped in rigorous physiology, but delivered to them in a way that they would find accessible and hopefully enjoyable. So our tagline is ridiculous humans, serious fitness. And we call our clients ninjas, and we don't call it a gym. We call it the Enchanted Ninja Clubhouse of Glory and Dreams. And our mascot is the unicorn. And we have been very, very fortunate, because that approach, which I think is combining artistry and madness and the Dada movement with very rigorous best practices fitness has led to a lot of success for us. So we were lucky enough in that we were successful enough, and the culture is obviously pretty memorable. So that started opening up a lot of other opportunities for us. We were on the Inc. 500. I started getting a lot of speaking opportunities. And then most recently, we accidentally started another business called Business for Unicorns. So these days I split my time half between running MFF, which now has 2 locations, and between working with my business partner on Business for Unicorns, which essentially works with people on entrepreneurship, with the soft skills of entrepreneurship, which is things like customer service, coaching conversations, management, and the things that we feel are particularly our competencies.
That was the one thing I wasn't aware of. I knew you for the fitness piece of it before I met you and when I met you. And then I went on your website. I'm like, what is this whole thing with the unicorns? And I had no idea that was another thing that you were doing. So I was wondering what came first, the fitness or the unicorns?
The fitness came first. And then the Business for Unicorns has been not like MFF was sort of like add water and wow, it's a big business. So, which has been amazing and so fun and so in line with Michael and mine's passion. But that literally is 9 months ago, that business didn't exist practically. And now it's basically half of our focus. And Michael, my business partner, it's probably about 75% of his focus. So I'm a little bit more half and half.
I saw that. I was like, wow, this is like what you have on your website for Business for Unicorns. You have a lot going on, and there's quite a bit of parallel between you and I. I accidentally started an improv theater. I accidentally fell into that sort of kind of along the same reasons as you. I was wanting that kind of my own community and create my own playground because it didn't exist. And I'd moved from Chicago. Yeah, I moved from Chicago to South Carolina and they didn't know what it was. And it was, talk about not really fitting into this community. It was a challenge. And so I really just kind of wanted to play again and was kind of put into a position of everybody. So why don't you just start teaching people improv and do that? And so it's very accidental. And I started doing that. And like within a year, someone's like, why don't you build a theater? And I'm like, that's crazy. In a mall, even crazier. And it all came together that way. And then similar to Business for Unicorns, next thing you know, I'm getting those calls for how did you do that? How do you start a business?
Totally.
Similar kind of things. It sounds like that's kind of what happened for you.
Yeah, it all happened very organically.
Which is really cool. And I think that's encouraging and inspiring for anyone who's listening. We're talking about becoming accidental entrepreneurs, but I think especially creatives, we like to create things. That's oftentimes how it does happen.
Yeah, it's very true. And I definitely would probably, not that I would be a fan, of course, of labeling myself as a cliche creative, but if I had to, I probably would identify still to this day more as an artist than an entrepreneur, which is a great term. It's almost too fancy for me. I'm like a blue collar guy. I'm like an artist, like I'm a small business owner. Feels a little bit more accurate, though I certainly don't judge anybody for if that's the term they identify with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been an incredible creative outlet in a way that before I did it, I didn't understand. I didn't understand that creating a business is a form of self-expression. And particularly coming from a life as a New York City actor, where definitionally there's not that much in your control. I mean, certainly you can make your own work. And quite frankly, the advent in technology in the past, really since I left the industry, unfortunately, has kind of changed the game. I think it's a little bit easier to make your own work. But I just feel like my life now, I'm so in the driver's seat, whereas an actor often was like, I would go in and sing my little ditty and hope they cast me. And if not, I'd go pass some hot dogs in a blanket at a catering event.
Yeah. I was there. I got out way early because just trying to get an agent became so daunting to me. I'm like, I'm not made for this. I can't do this. I came back to improv probably 15 years, 20 years later after when I had originally gotten into it. And then 20 years later, I could see how to monetize it because I had been through enough of a business career to pick up those skills. And so now what you're doing with Business for Unicorns, I'm sure that you run into this too, people who are in their businesses and you're trying to help them either get started or recalibrate. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's also not the easiest thing to start up a business. And I know that you're very big into, core values and knowing what your mission is and creating a culture, which is really something that I focus on. What are some of the things that you run into with helping some of those clients?
It's been really a mixed bag, because one thing that's been very interesting is it's a very diverse set of people that I think are drawn to what we do. And I think we're lucky in that first MFF and also Business for Unicorns. I think there's a lot of clarity who Michael and I are. So people tend to either go towards it or run away screaming, which is totally cool. And I think the thing that's been interesting is actually how diverse people are, because we have kind of three buckets of people that we work with. A lot of them are people that often find us through Mark Fisher Fitness and then are interested in the way we're doing things, and then fall down the Business for Unicorns rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. We now have a lot of just a broad network of entrepreneur friends. We live in New York City, so we know a lot of other people that work, if not directly in entrepreneurship, but a lot of the courses we offer, customer service, time management, building a team. These are things that even if you don't run your own business are still broadly applicable.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing is still our biggest audience, if you will, is still the fitness industry, which is fascinating to me, because this was a world I felt so like I would never fit into. And it's particularly interesting in that we're dealing with, a very not particularly touchy-feely kind of male-dominated, science-y, left-brainy field. Mm-hmm. And we get to work with them on a lot of what you might call right-brain competencies. So it's been very satisfying, because we often have the opportunity to work with people that are acknowledging that some of the ways they've been approaching things have created a ceiling on the growth and development of their business, and that the skill sets they need to get to the next level are learning how to be open to, at times, potentially painful feedback, and learning how to ask the right questions of their team and their customers, and learning how to really genuinely listen, and learning how to express caring for other people. So it's very fascinating. It's a very fascinating, because, you think of, and certainly again, the people that come to us tend to be, a little bit more softer side of Sears, but I just want you to imagine a typical 230 tatted up, arms folded, shaved head strength coach, and the opportunity to talk with that archetype about his feelings and his relationship with his team is so weirdly satisfying in full circle, because that was the person that unfairly I would have perceived as the guy that would have shoved me in the locker and taken my lunch money in high school. So it's a very bizarre thing for us to just hold each other emotionally and connect, and hopefully find a way to make their lives and their business a little bit better.
Well, I think you really tap into something that's important that I think a lot of businesses in general overlook, and it's the emotional intelligence piece. That's what it sounds like. I mean, the being able to be aware of other people's emotions and perceptions, including your own, and seeing those cues and being open to it, and then being able to ebb and flow with it, I think is what really makes the difference in whether or not your business makes it.
It is so true, because in many ways, I think emotional intelligence, I'm saying this out loud, and I don't know if I'll agree with it when I say it, but I think you might be able to say that emotional intelligence is so akin to what most people, or at least it's a foundational element of what most people think about when we're talking about corporate culture, right? Mm-hmm. So Patrick Lencioni, who is a business author, right? And amazing. So for anyone who has listening that's not familiar with his work, if you're in business at all, I highly recommend it. He's most well known for a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. However, my favorite book of his is a more traditional non-story style business book called The Advantage, which happens to be the only book I've read 5 times. And one of the points he makes in it, which I was like, slap myself in the face, is that it's very rare that you have a business or an organization close because they don't have the intellectual chops. Uh-huh. Usually, it's because there's some sort of dysfunction within the way that community, the way that team is operating with each other, that prevents them from extrapolating and utilizing their shared diverse intelligence. And it occurred to me upon reading that it is true. I don't know of a gym that has closed because the clients didn't believe that the trainers possessed an insufficient understanding of progressive lower spine mechanics. Closes because you're like, I just kind of felt weird. Like, I don't know. I felt like the people weren't like very friendly, and I didn't feel like I was welcomed. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm by no means am I making a case that you don't need to worry about domain competence. Obviously, we want to be good at what we're doing. I think that's a given. But ultimately, so much, particularly if you're in a service industry, so much of your client or customer's experience of you is how you're showing up. It's sort of the energy that you bring to it, the way you manage your own emotions, the way you look to serve that person. And then when you move from solopreneur or freelancer to a team, that adds another whole element to it, because I am so passionate about great work environments. And I also always need to qualify this and say, I'm definitely not perfect at it. It's not like I'm going to probably do something dumb right after this call. But to me, it feels like, the thing I feel most blessed about is I do feel like I've essentially created my own Narnia with this hand-picked group of 24 people that believe what I believe, that have similar values, and we disagree on everything, and we're constantly frustrating and hurting each other's feelings and like making each other mad. But usually, and again, we're not perfect, but usually we talk about it, and then we become better, I think, human beings, frankly, because we learn more about ourselves. We learn more about how we show up to other people. We learn how to effectively share things that are upsetting us in a way that is hopefully both candid and kind and elegant. And to me, those are the master skills of being a human. So if we get good at that, yes, first of all, you're going to make a lot more money, and cool, that's great. Let's all make money. I want to swim around in a vat of $100 bills like Scrooge McDuck. But I also think it makes us better friends. It makes us better husbands. It makes us better daughters. It makes us better anything we want to be in our life. And that to me is what I love most about it. I often think of the work environment at its best as like a psycho-spiritual dojo for mastery.
And again, that all goes back to the emotional intelligence piece of it from just the way you describe it. And I often say the same thing. I'm not the best boss, but I think if you can have a little bit of humility and know that sometimes I'm going to suck as a boss, but I'm going to admit it.
Yeah, I'll say I have many challenges, but I'm pretty good at being aware when someone points something out at me, like, that was not a good thing that I did. So I feel very lucky that I have a group of very thoughtful people that are kind and also willing to just completely be unrelenting.
Well, but
I could be doing better.
And wouldn't you agree that you've probably also attracted that? So let's shift for a little bit and talk about how do you attract that best talent that's the best fit for you and your business? How did that come to be for you?
I think there are probably two pieces, and this is something I've thought a lot about because I am aware as a student of the brain, first and foremost, like a cognition nerd, that, it's human nature to go back and make up stories to make sense of things. And I do think there is a role that luck plays in some of these things, but I do think we've been very successful. And as I've attempted to reverse engineer it, I feel like there seem to be two pieces to the success we've had in building the team we have. I think, first of all, by being crystal clear on who we are and what we believe in and what our values are and the things that matter to us, we've, first of all, selected other people that at least believe that they also believe those same things. So again, we're able to self-select out a lot of people that might be a wonderful, lovely person. It might be super technically competent, but MFF just wouldn't be the right fit for. Just silly things like it is a profanity-laden work environment. It is profanity-laden, and you get in part of your entry manual when you come in. We share everybody a document that I wrote in 2011, affectionately called How We Roll, which was a 9-page stream of consciousness brain dump when we hired our first team member. And in that document, I'll explain things like, because, we've read that there's research that in work environments where people feel comfortable cursing, you tend to get more transparency, more candor. And this is why that matters to us. So I think that's been one piece of it, is having the right people attracted to us. I think the harder piece, which of course is tough, is how do we choose the right people? And I think that is another one where any sane person approaches with humility. And again, I think we've done better than most, but I think it is hard to suss that out. I mean, without going too much in the weeds, I do think there are certain best practices of interviews one can get better at, learning how to, for instance, ask about specific circumstances in the past as opposed to hypotheticals. How would you handle if? Yeah. I think certainly checking references, and instead of asking, like my favorite move is instead of asking the reference, what was so-and-so's biggest challenge? Oh, nothing. They were really great. But if you ask, what would so-and-so's colleagues say so-and-so's biggest challenge? Well, I guess if you ask their colleagues, they might say. So I think there are tactics and things you can learn, but I also have to concede, not very scientific. I've been famous/infamous for hiring random people. So famously, if I meet someone, it's not uncommon for me to be like, yep, you've been called by the unicorns. I don't know what you do, but you're going to have to tell your boss you're quitting. I've at times, we had a guy came on our team this past year that I courted for 5 years. For 5 years, I just chased this guy down until he finally moved down to New York City from Boston.
Wow.
So, I've also, on the one hand, I have, my science, like left brainy approach, but a lot of it for me has been really gut instinct. And a lot of that, frankly, also is a gut instinct that just says, for some reason, not the right thing. And I'm as analytical about myself and my own bias as I am of other people. So I don't know necessarily that I recommend that, but just that process has been very useful for us. And certainly, I think the last tactical thing I would give to anybody that is considering to grow their team is obviously the best way to find out how someone will be when you work with them is to, if you can find a way to work with them. So we're lucky because in the fitness industry, there is a standard of people doing internships. And we decided we didn't want to do an internship. So we actually have what's called a trainer in residence program where people join the MFF team. At any given moment, we have a few people that are guesting into MFF to learn about our culture. That also allows them to vet us and them to vet them. And then in our industry, the other thing that is nice is we have hired a lot of our ninjas, because maybe we're not working with them intimately. But if you're working with someone for a couple years at a time, if we see the way you train, if we see the way you conduct yourself over email, if we have a sense of your energy level, the team collectively, the tribe at times has just like decided somebody was one of us, and then we would just absorb them into our atom, or into the membrane.
We do something similar at Carolina Improv. You can't even audition to be part of the cast until you've actually gone through a similar kind of process. Like, you have to take our classes because everybody does improv a little bit differently in every city. But, of course, we'll have people move here from New York and talk about all their improv experience. But our culture is different from any other culture. So you go through our classes and you have to get through so many classes before you can be eligible to audition. I don't care how much experience you have. But you also have to be willing to work the box office and sell beer. And that's really the first part of the audition is, did you show up on time? How did you get along with everybody? Did you have the yes and mindset that we do? Yeah. And then we will think about it, whether or not, and to your point, the tribe has to say, we really like him.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, and it's interesting, and I'm currently debating maybe one day, there are limitations to this, but right now I basically give the entire team veto power. Because again, we're lucky in that we have a lot of people that want to come here. And the fact of the matter is, half of our team, as you might expect, and you have a lot of diversity, basically is going to be cool no matter what happens. But half the team is very discerning about what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. So because we're lucky in that we've worked very hard to create a pipeline before we've needed it, I'm often relying on the team's perspective, because the reality is, if I have one person on my team I trust that just has a reservation about somebody, even if it's just them, I don't really have a reason to continue pursuing that, because we usually have a pretty decent enough bench that I have other opportunities of people that are more uniformly beloved.
You have this very irreverent kind of style.
One might say that, yes.
Kind of unapologetically, which I personally find attractive. And I got to tell you that it really was very inspirational for me. I had emailed you yesterday. I was like, oh my God, I just watched your TEDx Broadway, and like, wow. What was inspiring for me is that, and I've slowly kind of gotten back to this. I think many of us in business have a tendency, at least I did for a while, to worry so much about what everybody says. This is what you should be doing. This is how you should behave. This is how you should do it. You yourself have made waves in the fitness industry of kind of shaking it up a little bit. And the way you come across from a marketing standpoint is like, you don't give a damn. Like, this is who you are. And I got a unicorn and I'm wearing a cape and I'm going to swear. And, it was refreshing because I've just kind of come back to that of being like exactly who I want to be. And if you don't like it, then we're probably not a good fit for you to work with us.
Totally.
So have you run into scenarios where people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you do that?
Honestly, no. And I'm sure that there probably are people that have reacted like that and just haven't shared that with us exactly. But it seems to me in my N=1, not a lot of data here, but certainly my own experience, that the more comfortable people are with themselves and the more clear they are about who they are, the more everybody else respects it. Even if it's not for them, they totally get it. Because one thing that admittedly I still will probably forever be working on, in addition to being empathetic, I'm quite sensitive. One might even call me a wuss. So I am at times very sensitive. I very much want people to like me, and that often works for me, except for in the situations where it works horribly against me. So it is interesting that I'm also at the same time cognizant of the fact that certainly our brand is so unapologetic and in your face. And I think, and again, I'm hesitant to sort of make up kind of, my own myths here, but part of me feels like I just got my butt kicked so much in my 20s and I just struggled so hard that by the time MFF happened, I was kind of like, F it. And I just decided I was just going to be full me. And it was strategic. I also, was aware that I was going to be differentiating and frankly, that it was authentic and I was going to get away with it because it was me. But in my experience, if that's like authentically who you are, and also if it's coming from a place of unconditional positive regard and kindness and love for the world around you, it's very rare that people are going to really rage against it. And when they do, I guess they'll do it quietly because we haven't really heard a lot of that. I mean, even MFF, on occasion, we've had people sign up and be like, okay, this is not for me. Because I get it. It's a lot. It's like, it can be very vulgar and it's a crass place and there's a lot of profanity, but it's also served up with a sweetness and a kindness and a gentle, nurturing sensibility that is part of what I think makes it work, because it's so bizarre. These things just like shouldn't go together. So on the occasion when that's happened, it's never been a big deal. It's never been someone like, I'm so deeply offended, I don't believe this place. Because I think one thing structurally that I think we've done pretty well is the marketing. Again, it's going to self-select out. So we often internally talk about the marketing onion, because when you're on, if you follow me on Facebook, I might drop like an F-bomb here and there, but you're seeing a lot of glitter and you're seeing a lot of unicorns and rainbows. Then if you get on the newsletter, suddenly we're not asterisking out the profanity anymore. And now things are getting really flirty and we're sexually propositioning our newsletter subscriber. And then when we come into the clubhouse, now there is a naked man with wings just running through the classroom for no reason. So we do a good job of, by the time you're in, it's sort of like, it's kind of like a marketing funnel, right? Like an escalation strategy where we're ascending you to deal with full on butt out nudity.
So that's for real. Somebody did go running in naked.
Yeah. There's definitely nudity from time to time. That's true. Not a ton. And that's the other thing that I have to say is I have to concede about MFF is I feel like it's probably an anticlimactic pace for most people because, obviously we put the crazy stuff on social media. And of course, stories tend to get exaggerated. So in a joke among the teams, we'll go to conferences and they'll be talking about MFF. They're like, you got to have culture. Like MFF, at the end of their classes, you know what they do? They strip you down naked. And then they have rabid monkeys chase you and try to have sex with you and you run. And then the whole team is laughing because we're like, yeah, we just do deadlifts and we do push-ups and somebody's wearing a cape. So it's, the vast majority of MFF is, I certainly wouldn't call it staid, but it's like a warm gym where people know your name and we're happy to see you and we know what we're doing. And we might say some funny stuff here and there and curse a little bit, but mostly for instance, I think anybody's mom would feel comfortable at MFF.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Maybe not anybody's mom, but like most people's mom. I mean, honestly, even the demographic of the ninjas tends to be more like 40s and 50s these days. So it's definitely not, it comes across. And again, we hit that for social media. It's like quote unquote purple cow marketing. I know what's going to get shares. I know what people will be like, you won't believe what happened in my gym. But the vast majority of the time, I think we're just doing great customer service and great training.
And you've got the 2 locations. I'm sure you get this question a lot. Have you thought about franchising or licensing, or what's your plans on the fitness centers themselves?
Yeah, we have thought about that. I would say at this moment, that is very distinctly not my vision, only because MFF is, it's like a love letter to New York City for me, right? It's like I wrote this love letter, and it's like I always want it to feel messy, maybe like I made you this thing, and I dropped it on the way here, so there's like a little bit of dirt and mud on it, but I made this thing for you because I love you and I made it just for you. And I am not sure, and this, admittedly could be a failing on my part. I don't know that I know how to scale MFF indefinitely. And part of that is also we made some business choices to create a level of individualization and personalization that just, frankly, just doesn't scale just from a business administrative perspective. Now, I think at some point I am interested in franchises, and it's something I study because I study all of business. So maybe one day I could get involved with a different concept, but it probably wouldn't be Mark Fisher Fitness. And at this point, my vision is to continue to use MFF as a petri dish, maybe grow it up to like 5, 6, 7 locations around the city at most, and then use what I'm learning in MFF to be more effective at the teaching and speaking and coaching in Business for Unicorns. Yeah. And then use what I learned in Business for Unicorns to be more effective at the petri dish of MFF.
And the Business for Unicorns, why unicorns?
Yeah, they chose us. It was so weird. Everyone's like, why did you pick them? I was like, I don't remember picking them. They just appeared one day. And it is kind of true in that like a lot of MFF's iconography was things that came from the ninjas, because, I'm in the call for how long? Like I say a million crazy things a second. I'm sure I'm talking about dinosaurs and Vikings and all sorts of crazy stuff. But for some reason, periodically an image or a symbol or something would just capture the ninja's imagination. There was something about the unicorn that started and literally I kind of remember as a Facebook thread from like 8 years ago that there was this long extended thread with some people I hadn't even met yet, by the way, about like, oh, I can't wait to take class in the park. Will there be unicorns? There will. Will there be riding rainbows? Yes. And there'll be glitter. And then we just kind of adopted and just sort of adopted them as our spirit animal. Okay. Though internally, we often refer to, so it's quite grand and precious, but we often refer to, doing the bidding of our dark and lustful unicorn overlords. And we often refer to the path to Unicorpia, which is our sovereign island kingdom nation state that we aspire to own one day, which is like 97% metaphor, but 3% Necker Island happens. So I don't see why we can't have our own island. So there's something about the unicorn, I think, as a symbol of something that is rare, of something that is elegant, of something that is like people don't believe exists. It's something that is magical. There's something about that I think speaks to, at its best, what MFF, what like Business for Unicorns aspires to be, like a world of like actual conscious businesses, and maybe that's just like a dark jump into my own psychology of someone who was raised as an artist and had a lot of junk about money and business. And, essentially thought if you're in business, you're just fundamentally a terrible person. You're a terrible person and you're trying to make money and you suck, right? I was like a hardcore bohemian. And I no longer think that. And I understand why other people do. And I have great empathy for it because I did for a long time. But I am a believer that conscious businesses can be the greatest force for social change in our world, and can be certainly the way that, at least for me, for my admittedly limited skill set, I can impact the world in the most beautiful way before I kick it and make the maximum positive impact before I carry on.
You're also doing a lot with then also having a give back to the community. Is that the Uprising? Yeah.
So the Uprising is our nonprofit, which we incorporated because we essentially wanted to take the good juju we were making in the clubhouse and make it a little bit more externally facing throughout the community. And it's been interesting because that's definitely been a journey, because that has definitely had its challenges at times. I think in the beginning, we weren't really sure what to do with it. We're like, we want to do good stuff. Let's do good stuff. But it turns out like that's not clear enough. Business 101. And now I think it's this year, it's like really fun. Actually, last year, like really found its groove, which is basically, it's just another curated gathering place for the community to get together and talk about often tough stuff. And that's a thing, admittedly, that is still, I think we're still trying to sort out with the Uprising, because we do monthly salons but they're not always easy salons, right? Because they're things they tend to be on, like social justice and the hashtag Me Too movement, and the challenge of transgendered youths, and implicit bias and structures of white supremacy. Like, these are not like feel good, like but at the same time, I think it's very important for our community to spend time together, and again, to live out that ethos of being willing to consider at times like uncomfortable things, and really just learn, like, how can I be the best human? How do I accidentally not be a shitty human at times? Which again is like hard to do. It's no one's fault. And again, I study psychology. I'm aware of these sort of, wiring of certain evolutionary psychology tenets. I'm aware of cognition, the way our brain is constantly shortcutting us. And I feel grateful to have a community of people that are interested in doing that often very, very challenging work. And it's been really beautiful too. And frankly, I don't honestly have a ton to do with the uprising other than being a supporter of it and going to the events. So even that has allowed another way, an opportunity for people that are better at that in our community to really take the reins and stimulate conversations, so we can hopefully, again, just continue our journey of trying to get 1% better every day and learn how do we be, the best humans we can.
I know Business for Unicorns is new. Where do you see that going, and how did it get started, and how have you scaled it, and how do you grow it and get people, clients, and how has all that come about?
Yeah, again, it's been very organic in that I think, and it's also happened rather fast. I think Keeler and I, in our back of our heads, knew that we were passionate about like the business of business, if you will. And what happened was, I think we just started collecting people that we knew that were passionate about the way we were doing things, and that were interested in learning from us and interested in our content. And one thing just kind of led to another. So it started with getting a few speaking gigs here and there. I was very lucky because I was a professional actor for many years. I feel like I comport myself pretty well when I have an opportunity to speak in front of an audience. And that, I think, combined with, I think, some, pretty legit content, has made for a pretty strong stage presence for me. And that means usually every time I speak, that has led to other opportunities. So through that, through both my speaking and through people that are aware of MFF, we just continue to be exposed to more and more people. So I guess it was about a year and a half ago, we realized that we were developing, again, the small community of people that were interested in what we were doing. And after about the first, I think, year and a half of speaking, I just didn't really know where it was going, but I knew I'd figure it out, right? So I'm like, I'm just going to keep going and keep talking to people and figure out, what do people need? What's not out there? So it was probably about, I guess, a year and a half ago, we did our first 2-day business event, which we called Inside the Unicorn, which was the business secrets of Mark Fisher Fitness. And then from there, we realized very quickly that 2 days was not remotely enough. And in many ways, the current Business for Unicorns curriculum is that 2-day event, but now spread over, 5 different courses and 15 months of content and, 10 days of education. And that's kind of how all of that happened. Again, just one thing led to the other, right? So the reason Biz for Unicorns wound up having all these different courses were, number one, Michael and I felt like we weren't even scratching the surface of what we wanted to with the original 2-day event. And number two, it was a little too generalized. So you'd have sometimes very sophisticated owner-operators with multiple 7-figure businesses taking the same course as somebody who's just considering starting a business. So it just forced us to shoot to the middle of the room in a way that we weren't excited about. Furthermore, I think a lot of these, and I love conferences, I'm a conference junkie. So this isn't a criticism, because I personally go talk at me for 2 days. I feel great. I'm like stoked. I don't even hit a nap. I'll write things down. I'm having a happy time. But as someone that comes from fitness, my understanding of human behavior change is, for a lot of people, it's not just knowledge, it's how do they actually utilize that over time. So the other thing about Biz for Unicorns that we wanted to play with was that model. And it's certainly not as if no one else is doing this out there, but instead of doing a live event, it's a live event with 3 months of coaching with weekly modules. So we get time to work with people to actually integrate the things. We can focus on right sizing the habit. So instead of trying to overhaul things all at once, finding what is the right rung of the ladder for that individual to start on to affect whatever that module is speaking to. So that's kind of how that's happened. And because of it, for the most part, we've been lucky. We just have met a lot of people. And my intention for Business for Unicorns is we'll see how big it scales. But for me, my dream for it is I would like to get to the place where I have maybe 1,000 people that I really love working with, that take courses on and off, that all spend several $1,000s a year on average. And that is quite a business. That is quite a business, particularly look at the margins for Business for Unicorns.
Yeah.
And I'm good. And at that point, between that and, MFF doing very well, at that point, like I could see myself being very happy, because then my time is the only thing that matters. Just what is the time that I have to spend with my wife and my dog, and eventually, if I'm lucky enough, my kids. So that's sort of where I kind of see it all going now. And then the final caveat I, of course, must give you is I know that these things change. So right now, that feels like a dream. But I imagine, in 2 years, I might be like, oh, I want to be this thing, whatever. But at the moment, I just want to make an impact on the people I love. And, I find myself often introspective about the entrepreneurial desire for more, which is useful and isn't wrong. And please understand, this isn't a judgment, but I often hear people, like, I'm gonna 10x my business, right? Or I'm gonna help 10 million men and women achieve their goals. And I find that like potentially useful, right? Like potentially that allows us to put some quantitative numbers on the impact we want to make on the world. But it often, at times, to me, I wonder aloud if there's an element of spiritual materialism in that. Where, essentially we're creating an immortality project, and it's not really about like that. It's about like gives us something to do while we're currently a ghost here in our meat suit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do long to balance my desire to impact the world broadly and impact humanity with making sure I have enough time for my loved ones and stay on the couch with my wife.
Yeah. And isn't that the way it really should be? Is, we don't have to be necessarily defined by what we're doing from a job perspective or a business perspective. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to have more time to be with the people that we love.
Totally.
How do you make it easier? And it comes down to that, not just the scaling piece of it, but it just comes down to, I think, doing something that you really love that can become organic enough to accidentally become a business that puts food on the table.
Totally. And, and these things move about, and I certainly don't mean to pretend I've got it figured out. I certainly don't mean to poo-poo anybody that's driven by those sort of quantitative numbers. But, I just know that there's a human desire for more. And I pride myself on being introspective enough to just really like ask reflective questions when I'm noticing that desire to eat the world alive. But, I also concede it has its place.
Couple other questions, some advice and tips for other people listening. You do a lot of speaking. Speaking is really important, I think, from a marketing perspective, if you can get out in front of people. Any advice that you have for people who are trying to start speaking or getting more speaking, and how do they, any suggestions on that?
Yeah, definitely. This is so dumb, but here's one, it's not dumb at all. And I take that back, and I apologize if now what I say offends anybody. But I've realized that people don't practice their talk, which sounds to me like crazy, only because I'm an actor. But if I were to give one piece of advice, is I'm amazed how often people will go and give a speech that they haven't rehearsed out loud, saying the words loudly and physically moving. So the craft of speaking matters, right? But we know it's not just about the content. It's also about the delivery. And for many people, understandably, if you don't have a BFA, if you didn't spend 10 years doing this, listen, it's going to be harder. And I so have empathy for that. However, every master was a disaster. It is a skill set that you can get better at. You can do Toastmasters. There are a number of great books. My pal Michael Port does amazing work on this. I recommend the book Steal the Show if you want to learn more about it. But I think that is something, in addition to, of course, again, I'm assuming we're great at the content, but I think there is actually a craft that one can master, and it will require discipline and will require practice. You got to do the reps, right? It's like anything else in life. And it is something that I think anybody looking to get very serious about a career in speaking would benefit from taking that craft very seriously, from understanding stagecraft, understanding how to put together slides, understanding comedy, understanding timing, because that stuff really will affect the way people respond to your material.
Yeah, I was going to add and improv, honestly.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, that's really what I fell into speaking because of improv. It's not like I set out to; it just sort of happened. And to your point, like understanding timing for me is everything, and being able to read an audience and know that if something I just said they don't like, I know that I can like quickly pivot out of that, whatever I'm talking about.
It's so true. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on this because I know you do a lot of this too. I mean, for me, that is of all the things, and I feel lucky. I feel like I get to do a lot of things that I am well equipped for, that I'm wired for, and I'm trained in. But for me, the ultimate flow state is when I'm in a room full of a ton of people, and this fun opportunity to just like sink in with that audience and read all the different people's faces, body language.
Yes.
And it's subconscious, right? It's not like you're like, oh, this person didn't like that. And oh, this person's having a great time. And you're just feeling like, oh, the room is going down. All right, time to get everybody up and step clap, and time to put on these pictures of puppies I've got queued up on my slides. Everybody, look at the puppies, right? And, you know, I think that sort of, you know, leading the audience on a journey and riding that wave is my favorite flow state in the world.
Yeah. And I think what's been most effective for me is because I can read faces and I can read body language extremely well. And that really does come from the improv background. I can feel the room. I know exactly what the aura is, but I will actually call it out, and not directly to one person, but I will say something like, oh my gosh, you guys are so tired. You just got back from lunch.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, you guys, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So, you know, I can go with that, or I will literally talk about it and go, all right, so some of you right now, one of you has to go to the bathroom. You can go. It's okay. It won't bother me. Like I will literally, I will say what their inner thoughts are, and they look at me like I'm some sort of Wiccan, like, how does she know this? But it breaks the ice for them to feel like, okay, I can let my guard down. Maybe I should listen, because I don't know if she's going to call on me at some point, which I will. And I really I saw it in both your TEDx and something else. I actually do, sometimes I kick off a talk with making people dance.
Yeah.
And I saw you do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like siblings.
You know, I think that's another like immediately actionable tactic is that, and there's actually some data on this, that the brain can really only focus for about 20 minutes. So if you have a 60-minute talk, there needs to be some way of engaging with the information. Furthermore, it's reflective of the way of like adult learning best practices. Most adults don't learn effectively by just being talked at for an hour. Even if you are very effective, you have to find some way to get them to engage with the information or move around, or so that type of stuff I think is massively underutilized and underrated.
I always usually include a yes and exercise because it's like, oh, good, I don't have to listen to her anymore. You can then directly apply what I've just been talking about, and then we can kind of dialogue it out, and people are far more engaged by that kind of presentation than me talking for an hour.
Totally. It just forces people to engage with the material experientially instead of it becoming this academic, which again, and I'm a nerd and I'm like a little bit outlier. Like I like the nerdy academic stuff. Just talk to me for 2 days and I'm a happy guy. But for most people, that's not going to be an effective way for them to learn.
You had mentioned at the top of this that you were reading one training and one business book. What are some of your favorite, most recommended business books?
Oh my gosh, where to begin here? You know what? Oh gosh, I don't have it handy. I was going to pull up I have an ever rotating book of like my top 10 favorite books of all time. I'll give just a few off the top of my head that I think are amazing. I think Robert Cialdini's Influence is maybe the only marketing book you need to know, not for tactics, but certainly I think for the principles of understanding marketing and influence. I think Ray Dalio's Principles is another masterpiece of a book. If you want to learn how to think effectively, if you want to learn how to effectively get as close to as possible to what the truth of a matter is, so that way you can make an effective decision about how to address that. I think Patrick Lencioni's, if we're speaking business, his book Advantage, like I mentioned, is definitely one of my all-time favorites. And then I do read a lot of business, but I also read very broadly. If I were to throw another couple books that are perhaps more broadly liberal arts education-y. Sapiens blew my mind, which is sort of the book of the moment for the industrial thought leader complex. It's essentially a history of the humankind, and it is deeply upsetting and challenging, confronting, and very persuasive. I think The Moral Animal by Robert Wright, or anything by Robert Wright, I think is worthwhile reading. That's essentially a book, a study of evolutionary psychology. And if I were to throw just one more in there, I would have to go with Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who is another brilliant, infuriating, confronting thinker who is a very important person. And I'll lead people to go check out the synopsis and see if any of them resonate with them. But those are some books that have massively shaped the way I look at being a human and how to be an effective human.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Any final strategy for humans in general or people in business?
I guess the thing I kind of always go back to that I'm such a believer in is just, growth mindset, that humans can get better, and that the reality is there is always an element of luck involved in life. There are certain genetic gifts and dispositions that everybody is blessed / cursed with. But at the end of the day, that anybody that was seriously disciplined about methodically working on whatever skill set you think you'll need to master towards whatever your immediate goals towards your long-term vision. To me, that is the path to living an awesome life of impact.
If people want to get a hold of you, best ways to do that? Best
way is I am very active on Facebook, which I gave you the link for. I am unfortunately well out of friends, but you can follow me, which is the same thing. We don't have to let Facebook decide our friendship. We're not going to do that. And I'm actually very active on Facebook talking about all of these things, everything from business to philosophy to books I'm reading to goal setting to time management, all that stuff. I write a lot on there. Okay. And then certainly people can check out Mark Fisher Fitness. They can check out businessforunicorns.com. And they can check out markfisherhumanbeing.com is where my personal website is.
Thank you so much for your time today for The Pivotal Leader. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
And thank you to everybody else for listening to The Pivotal Leader today. I will be sharing show notes for this episode on our website at thepivotalleader.com, and it will include all that contact information if you want to follow Mark, because he can't accept any more friends on Facebook, but you can follow him. I will include all that information in the notes. The Pivotal Leader is a production of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. Remember, you can find our podcast on iTunes, and if you're an iTunes subscriber, please leave a rating and review. Don't forget to email me any questions you might have about employee engagement and customer acquisition at gina@pivot10.com, and I'll answer those either in email or an upcoming episode. And until next time, if you're feeling stuck in your business, it's probably time to pivot. You've been listening to The Pivotal Leader. To learn more about how to shift your culture and pivot to success, visit pivot10results.com. That's pivot10results.com.